Her name has echoed through the ages as a symbol of treachery, manipulation, and pure evil. But what if everything you've been told about Queen Jezebel is a lie? Was she the villainous queen who destroyed a kingdom, or the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by her enemies? Get ready to uncover the shocking truth behind the wicked life of Queen Jezebel, because what you think you know might just be the greatest historical deception ever told. For over 2,000 years, Jezebel's name has been linked to cruelty, idolatry, and murder. But was she really that monstrous? Or was she a powerful queen whose legacy was twisted by those who feared her? Was Jezebel truly the puppet master who manipulated a king, or a woman forced to make dangerous choices in a world that was determined to destroy her? The answers might just surprise you. Queen Jezebel's reign in ancient Israel is one of the most infamous chapters in history. Known for her controversial alliances, her defiance of the prophets, and her brutal end, Jezebel's story has been told time and time again, mostly as a cautionary tale. But behind the tales of wickedness lies a complex figure, one whose legacy has been distorted by those who didn't understand her. In this video, we will dive deep into the shocking rise and fall of Queen Jezebel. From her early life as a foreign princess to her dramatic influence over Israel's throne, we'll uncover the truth behind the scandals, the power plays, and the dark prophecies that surrounded her. This is the real story of Queen Jezebel, and by the end, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about this legendary queen. Before Jezebel was the infamous Queen of Israel, she was simply a princess in the ancient city of Sidon. Born into royalty, Jezebel's early life was far from ordinary. She was the daughter of King Ethbal, a Phoenician king who worshipped the god Baal, an important detail that would later define much of her reign. Sidon, nestled along the Mediterranean coast, was a powerful Phoenician city-state known for its wealth, trade, and influence. From a young age, Jezebel would have been raised in a court that prided itself on its cultural and religious practices that centered around the worship of Baal, a god that was far removed from the Israelite faith. But what set Jezebel apart from other royal daughters of her time was her ambition. She wasn't content with simply being a princess. She wanted to leave a mark on the world. And she would do so by securing a marriage that would change the course of history. When Jezebel married King Ahab of Israel, it wasn't just a union of love, it was a political alliance. At the time, Israel was a divided and struggling kingdom, vulnerable to outside threats and internal instability. Ahab, despite his royal blood, needed the alliance with Sidon to solidify his position as king. And Jezebel, with her royal lineage and political savvy, was the perfect match. Their marriage wasn't just about politics, though. It was a partnership that would have profound consequences for Israel. Jezebel quickly rose to a position of great influence in Ahab's court, overshadowing even her husband. While Ahab was often depicted as weak and indecisive, Jezebel proved to be a shrewd and determined ruler who understood how to navigate the dangerous waters of palace politics. As queen, Jezebel brought with her the religion and practices of her homeland, including the worship of Baal, which stood in direct opposition to the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel. She wasted no time in promoting Baal worship across the land, establishing temples, and even building an altar in the capital city of Samaria. But her rise to power wasn't without resistance. Many in Israel saw her as a foreigner, an outsider who threatened the very foundation of their faith. The prophets of Yahweh, led by figures like Elijah, would soon become her most vocal critics. They saw her as a dangerous force, one that would lead Israel down a path of idolatry and destruction. However, Jezebel's power and influence only grew. Her ability to manipulate those around her, including her husband Ahab, made her a formidable queen. She didn't just support her husband's reign, she controlled much of the decision-making behind the scenes. If Ahab was weak, Jezebel was his strength. Despite the growing opposition, Jezebel's ambition knew no bounds. She wasn't content to simply rule alongside her husband. She was determined to shape the kingdom in her image, regardless of the cost. And as we'll see, the further she went down this path, the more enemies she made, and the more her reign would become synonymous with betrayal and bloodshed. Jezebel's reign as queen was marked by audacity, power, and a deep clash of faiths. Unlike most queens, who might have used their influence behind closed doors, Jezebel was an unapologetic force of nature. Her rise to prominence wasn't just about politics. It was about her unyielding desire to reshape the kingdom to align with her own beliefs and vision, no matter the cost. Central to her reign was her devotion to the worship of Baal, the storm god of her Phoenician homeland. While Israel's king Ahab had a somewhat passive approach to religious matters, Jezebel was unwavering in her devotion. She aggressively promoted Baal worship across Israel, building temples and funding the priests of Baal. She didn't just allow the worship of this foreign god, she actively sought to make it the dominant religion in Israel, even going so far as to persecute those who held to the traditional faith of Yahweh. The introduction of Baal worship was deeply offensive to many Israelites. Yahweh, the God of Israel, was at the center of their identity and their laws, and Jezebel's actions threatened to erase the faith that had held them together for centuries. This religious shift didn't just cause tension among the people, it sparked a direct conflict with the prophets of Yahweh, who stood firm in their belief that Israel should remain loyal to their God. Among the most prominent of these prophets was Elijah, who became Jezebel's greatest adversary. The most famous confrontation between them came on Mount Carmel, where Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to a public showdown. The scene is one of biblical drama at its peak. 450 prophets of Baal versus one lone prophet of Yahweh. The challenge was simple. Both sides would build altars, sacrifice bulls, and call upon their gods to send fire to consume the offering. The God who answered would prove to be the true God. As expected, the prophets of Baal called upon their God, chanting and dancing, but nothing happened. Elijah, mocking them, urged them to shout louder. But after hours of futile attempts, Elijah took his turn. He doused his altar with water 3 times, and then, with a simple prayer, called upon Yahweh. In an instant, fire rained down from heaven, consuming the water-soaked sacrifice. Elijah had won. The people of Israel were left in awe. Yet despite this divine intervention, Jezebel remained undeterred. Rather than being swayed by the spectacle, she became more determined than ever to eliminate the threat posed by Elijah and the prophets of Yahweh. In fact, after hearing about the defeat of her prophets, she sent a deadly message to Elijah, vowing to have him killed. Her reaction was cold and calculated. She was willing to stop at nothing to silence those who defied her and her faith in Baal. But Jezebel's reign wasn't just about religious conflicts. It was also defined by her ruthless political maneuvering. She didn't shy away from using whatever means necessary to secure her power. One of the most notorious examples of her manipulation came with the case of Naboth, a man who owned a vineyard that Jezebel coveted. King Ahab, who had developed an interest in Naboth's vineyard, tried to buy it, but Naboth refused to sell, citing his family's ancestral ties to the land. Ahab sulked, disappointed by the refusal. Jezebel, seeing an opportunity to both please her husband and expand her power, devised a sinister plan. She orchestrated a false accusation against Naboth, accusing him of blasphemy against God and the king. With the help of false witnesses, Naboth was condemned to death by stoning. The vineyard was then seized, and Jezebel got what she wanted. This act of cruelty revealed the extent of her ambition and her willingness to sacrifice anyone who stood in her way. Jezebel's actions, driven by a deep belief in her own vision for Israel, left a trail of destruction. Her desire to transform Israel into a kingdom that worshipped Baal created divisions, angered the people, and turned the prophets of Yahweh into her mortal enemies. But more than that, her manipulation, cruelty, and disregard for human life showed a darker side of power, a side that was not afraid to get its hands dirty to maintain control. In the eyes of her supporters, Jezebel was a queen who understood the complexities of ruling and didn't hesitate to make the tough decisions for the good of her kingdom. But to those who opposed her, she was a tyrant, a villain who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals, no matter the cost. Her reign became a symbol of absolute power, a reminder that leaders who refuse to compromise on their beliefs can shape history, either for the better or for the worse. Jezebel was living proof that ambition, when combined with ruthlessness, can change the course of an entire nation. But it also made her many enemies, enemies that would one day come to haunt her in the most dramatic of ways. Jezebel's reign was built on a foundation of manipulation, cruelty, and unwavering ambition. But no matter how powerful a ruler might be, fate has a way of catching up with those who play the game of power too recklessly. Jezebel's downfall was foretold, and the prophecy that haunted her for years would come to pass in a way no one, not even she, could have anticipated. It all started with the prophet Elijah, whose faith in Yahweh was unwavering despite the threats Jezebel had issued against him. After her failed attempt to have Elijah killed, he fled into the wilderness, heartbroken and worn down by the constant battle between good and evil. But before he left, Elijah spoke a chilling prophecy that would seal Jezebel's fate. He foretold that Jezebel would meet a violent end and that the dogs would devour her body. The prophecy wasn't just a threat, it was a divine warning. Jezebel's reign of terror, her bloodthirsty actions, and her disregard for God's laws were coming to an end. Her enemies, both political and divine, had been patient, but soon vengeance would be served. After Elijah's prophecy, Jezebel's downfall began with the sudden rise of Jehu, a general in Israel's army. Jehu was anointed by the prophet Elisha to become the new king of Israel. Jehu's mission was clear: rid the kingdom of the worship of Baal and cleanse the land of Jezebel's corrupt influence. What followed would be one of the most dramatic moments in biblical history. Jehu rode into the city of Jezreel, where Jezebel resided, determined to bring about the end of her reign. When Jezebel heard of his arrival, she didn't cower. Instead, she adorned herself in royal attire, painted her face, and stood by the window, defiant and proud. It was as if she still believed that her power could sway fate, that her beauty and stature could intimidate those who came for her. But there was no escaping the wrath of God or the power of Jehu. Jehu called up to the eunuchs who were attending Jezebel, commanding them to throw her out of the window. The eunuchs, either out of fear or alignment with Jehu, did as they were told, and Jezebel was hurled from the high window to the ground below. She fell to the earth with a sickening thud, and her blood spilled out onto the stones of the palace courtyard. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but that was not the end of her humiliation. Jehu, after witnessing her violent death, ordered that her body be left where it lay. Later, his men went to retrieve what was left of her, but when they arrived, they found that the dogs had already come and devoured her remains, just as Elijah had prophesied. Only her skull, feet, and hands were left, a grotesque reminder of the woman who had once held so much power. The dogs, which had once been seen as scavengers of the streets, were now the agents of divine justice. Jezebel's body, once revered as a symbol of power, was reduced to nothing more than a collection of bones, ravaged by the very creatures that roamed the city. The royal queen, who had commanded fear and respect, had been brought low in the most humiliating and gruesome of ways. This moment wasn't just the end of Jezebel. It was the end of an era. Her death marked the fall of Baal worship in Israel and the end of the corrupt dynasties she had helped to build. Jehu's purge of her supporters and her influence left a lasting impact on the nation. Jezebel's name, once whispered with fear, was now a warning. It was a reminder that those who lead with ruthlessness and arrogance will inevitably face the consequences of their actions. Jezebel's death wasn't just a political downfall, it was a spiritual one. The woman who had defied Yahweh, who had sought to turn an entire kingdom away from the God of Israel, was punished in a way that symbolized the triumph of righteousness over evil. The prophecy had come to fruition, and Israel was finally free from the grip of her influence. But despite her violent and gruesome end, Jezebel's legacy didn't die with her. It lived on in the symbolism of her name, which would come to represent deceit, manipulation, and the consequences of turning away from God. Jezebel's story, though tragic, was one that would be passed down through generations, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the inevitability of divine justice. Jezebel's death marked the end of her physical reign, but her legacy would linger for centuries. The name Jezebel has since become a symbol of evil, manipulation, and deceit, forever tied to the infamous queen who defied the gods and wielded power without mercy. But what makes her legacy so enduring, and why does her name still carry such weight today? In the biblical narrative, Jezebel is often depicted as the quintessential villain, power-hungry, ruthless, and unrepentant. Her story has been passed down through generations, not just as a tale of a fallen queen, but as a cautionary narrative about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the consequences of turning away from righteousness. For many, Jezebel's name is synonymous with betrayal, manipulation, and a woman who will stop at nothing to maintain her power. She became a symbol of the corrupting influence of evil and an example of how pride and cruelty can bring about a ruler's downfall. But Jezebel's influence doesn't stop at the Bible. Over time, her name has found its way into countless cultural references, often used to describe women who use their beauty, charm, or manipulation to gain power over others. In literature, film, and popular culture, Jezebel's character has evolved into a stereotype of the femme fatale, the seductive and dangerous woman who wreaks havoc on the lives of those around her. This portrayal is often oversimplified, reducing her complex and multifaceted character to a mere villainous archetype. Yet, this oversimplification ignores the nuances of Jezebel's story. Her actions were driven not just by a thirst for power, but by a deep and unwavering commitment to her faith in Baal. To her, the introduction of Baal worship wasn't simply a matter of politics, it was a religious calling. She truly believed in her cause, just as much as those who fought against her believed in the righteousness of their own. In this way, Jezebel becomes a tragic figure, one whose devotion to her beliefs ultimately led her down a path of destruction. Even today, the name Jezebel continues to evoke powerful emotions. It's used in religious contexts to warn against the dangers of idolatry, immorality, and the corrupting effects of power. In the New Testament, the figure of Jezebel is mentioned again in the book of Revelation, where she is used as a symbol of false prophets and seductive, deceptive forces that lead others astray. The concept of a Jezebel spirit has found its way into modern Christian discourse, symbolizing a force of evil that seeks to manipulate and control. Jezebel's legacy also extends beyond religion. In popular culture, she has often been portrayed as the ultimate example of a woman who defies the norms of her time, using whatever means necessary to maintain control. This depiction can be seen in numerous films, books, and even television shows, where she is represented as a character who is both feared and admired, despite her morally questionable actions. Jezebel's story, steeped in ambition and tragedy, has inspired many stories of strong female characters who are both empowering and dangerous, reflecting society's complex relationship with power and gender. Moreover, Jezebel's influence can be seen in the way we discuss women in power today. Her name is often invoked in political discourse to describe women who are seen as manipulative or dangerous in their pursuit of power. Whether or not this is a fair representation, it speaks to the lasting impact of Jezebel's character and how the fear of female authority, combined with historical narratives, has shaped modern views on women who break societal norms. However, we must also remember that Jezebel's story is one of many perspectives. While some see her as the epitome of evil, others argue that her story reflects the struggles of a woman in a deeply patriarchal society, fighting to carve out her space in a world dominated by men. Whether you view her as a power-hungry tyrant or a misunderstood queen who paid the ultimate price for her beliefs, there's no denying that Jezebel's legacy remains a powerful part of our cultural lexicon. In the end, Queen Jezebel's story serves as a timeless reminder of the complexities of power, faith, and the human spirit. Her rise to power, her defiance of the prophets, her tragic death, and her enduring legacy all serve to challenge us to reflect on the true nature of leadership, faith, and the price of ambition. Jezebel's life was a series of dramatic highs and lows, and the lessons we take from her story are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Jezebel's story may have ended with the violent and humiliating death of a queen, but her legacy lives on, echoing through centuries of history, literature, and even modern-day discourse. Her name, forever synonymous with manipulation and power, serves as both a cautionary tale and a subject of fascination. As we look back on her life, we are reminded that the pursuit of power, whether driven by faith, ambition, or survival, can lead even the most formidable rulers down paths of destruction. Jezebel's reign, though short-lived, was one of monumental significance. Her story teaches us the complexities of leadership, the price of ambition, and the consequences of defying the forces of righteousness. Thank you for diving into the wicked life of Queen Jezebel with us today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's most notorious queen, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories from the past. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you see Jezebel as a villain or a victim of history? We'd love to hear your perspective. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.